Welcome to the Video Insiders Podcast. I'm Carlos Pacheco.
And I'm Tom Martin.
And we're and we're two self-isolating, social distancing, grizzled YouTube veterans with hundreds of thousands of billions of trillions of views between us. We're here to give you our 2 cents on the business and behind the scenes of YouTube, news, strategies, insight, and a sprinkling of depressing snark. What's going on with you, Tom?
Yeah, well, I was going to say what's the word on the street, but we're not allowed out on the street.
Let's talk about the weather.
Yeah, well, actually, it's nice. It's nice weather here in Essex, just outside.
Are you allowed to go out?
We are allowed to go out. We're not on lockdown, but as of today's recording, we are expecting imminent news of lockdown.
Yeah.
According to the rumor mill, but the rumor mill is pretty thick and fast at the moment, so no one really knows. But supermarket shelves empty. Yeah, pretty quiet. But life goes on pretty much in London so far. Yeah. Apart from pro sport, which is pretty much non-existent anymore.
Yeah, you're right. It's the new world we live in. As you can guess, we're recording this. It is the intro. We're basically March 20th today, I think. Yeah, March 20th. It's just to let you guys know, we tend to record our intros sometimes separately from our interview shows. So there is a little bit of a time difference. So obviously we don't talk about it during the interview show. So just a quick note on that one. But before we get started, we want to obviously thank our wonderful, wonderful sponsor, TubeBuddy. Take your channel to the next level with TubeBuddy. TubeBuddy is a tool that I use every single day when I manage YouTube channels. It gives you the tools to boost subscribers, views, and engagement. One of my favorite features is the bulk copy processing feature. I just love that, and it always impresses my clients when I talk about it. And they're like, what? I can update 100 videos or thousands of videos at a time? Actually, I think there's a limit. There's a 500 video limit, but still, I think there's a special request, just to let you know. Anyways, it's an awesome tool for building YouTube channels. Tom, how can people sign up?
Yeah, if you're not already using TubeBuddy, you can get a world exclusive multi-channel discount license by visiting videoinsiders.fm/TubeBuddy. Thank you, TubeBuddy.
Thank you very much, TubeBuddy. Tom, word on the street over here as well. We didn't talk about a little bit about me, but yeah, we're in full lockdown mode. We've been on self-isolation for 5 days now. It's been a full week as of this point. It's not really different from my day-to-day job in general. So obviously seeing everybody sort of like getting used to the new life is interesting. And I made a joke on Twitter about, needing advice on how to work remotely, just because it literally seems like everybody is giving advice on how to work remotely.
Everyone's the expert. But yeah,
exactly.
But so are you self-isolating just out of like good behavior, or have you or wifey got some kind of symptoms where you kind of have to be self-isolated?
Oh, it's a good behavior. Okay. Our province is in emergency mode. So, the streets are not empty, but they're definitely, it feels like a holiday. It feels like the day after Christmas or Christmas Day type of situation on the streets. Nobody's there. Restaurants are closed. Businesses are shutting down. Major retailers are starting to shut down or limit hours. So it's getting really, really, really serious at this point here. So it's just fascinating to see.
Yeah, I think we'll keep our powder dry a bit on this topic, because we're going to definitely dedicate a episode talking about it and its impact on our industry. By the time you hear this, we may have already put it out, so check your podcast feed wherever you get your podcast to see if that already exists. If not, it will be the next episode after this for sure.
Yeah, and I wanted to just send a special note to Nick Nimmin. A big thank you for him for putting us on a podcast to listens list recently, and it really gave the podcast a little boost in new audiences. So welcome to the show, new video insiders.
Yeah, Niminati, represent. Thank you for listening.
Niminati. Yeah, of course. Tom, I had an interview with Brendan Gahan. Brennan is the founder of Epic Signal, a social-first agency. It works with Fortune 500 brands and influencers, community building for campaigns, and it's been named Digitay's Digital Video Agency of the Year. Brennan is also an advisor to Vidcon. And I've been following Brennan for many years and always loved his insights on Twitter and LinkedIn, in terms of the marketing industry, the influencer ecosystem. And I want to bring people onto this podcast that give a different perspective from the marketing side of things, so that people understand, how people think or how the marketing industry looks at the influencer or online creator ecosystem. And I think that benefits creators to just understand the realities of people in that industry. So I wanted to have him on, and he graciously came on.
Yeah, I'd not really, surprisingly, come across Brendan and his work before. Looking at his CV, extremely impressive. So really excited to hear what he's got to say. But yeah, very surprised that I've not met him in person or virtually, because our industry is a very, very small one. I think me and you have a very, very strong overlap in our contacts and our kind of circles. So really interested to hear Brendan's take on the influencer market. Not something that I've had a huge experience in personally, kind of been on the fringes, been involved in a few projects. So really interested to see the opinion of someone who's not only experienced the rise and dip and rise and whatever it may be at the moment, but also somebody who's still in the weeds today. So yeah, really interested to see what he's got to say.
Yeah, awesome. So let's get to it. Just to remember that this was recorded before the craziness got serious, so we don't really talk about it in the interview. Let's get to it. Brendan, thank you very much for taking the time after a red eye to come on a podcast.
For sure.
How are you feeling?
I'm a little bit frayed around the edges, but I think I'll pull it together for this.
All right. So, Brennan, admittedly, I've been, socially stalking you like I do many of our guests, because I was realizing as I released a recent episode, I finally get to talk to all these people that I've been admiring, reading for many years, and you're one of these people.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about who you are, your career path, because I find it has a little bit of similarities of myself, where I spent a lot of time in advertising and then jumped into the world of YouTube. Albeit I went more into the YouTube side of things, whereas you went more into the influencer side of things. But talk to me a bit about, what's brought you to being who you are right now.
Yeah, for sure. It was pretty random, to be honest. So, when I graduated from school, I went to UC Santa Cruz. I got an internship in advertising up in San Francisco, and this was 2005. This is right when social media is starting to pop off, and everybody in the office would come around and be like, what's the deal with like MySpace and all this stuff? And kind of just being the young guy in the office, like I was the de facto resource for kind of like all things social media. And it was fun. Like I enjoyed it and I loved talking about it. And at the same time, I would like hear about the budgets and like a billboard, and I'd be like, how the hell are you paying tens of thousands of dollars for a billboard when you can go and do stuff on like YouTube or MySpace or whatever, and know that has an impact. And really my first kind of like actual foray into doing something in this space was in 2006 when I was at this agency. They'd since hired me. I heard the partners talking about how they were going to decline this piece of business because the client didn't really have much money and it wasn't worth their time. And I just kind of happened to be behind them, and I like turned around and I was like, hey, why don't we, I know it's not a bunch of money, but why don't we pitch the idea of like paying some YouTubers to do a piece of branded content around the brand? And they're like, yeah, sure, you can pitch it to them. And so basically the client bought it, and we ended up, I emailed Smosh, who was my idea for like the influencers we should work with.
Wow.
This is like early days, and like, we put it together. They drove down from, they're from right outside of Sacramento. So they drove down one day and we just met, hashed it out in a conference room over, 30 minutes. And we're like, all right, cool, let's do this. And it just crushed. Like, it got millions of views. It broke the brand's website, because of all the traffic. And I was like, this is huge. Like, I love this. Yeah. This is so exciting. And just kind of took it from there.
Yeah, I feel like that was sort of like the heyday of like, experimental, and the creators were just, way more, well, I mean, obviously they were like, anybody that's paying attention, they're like, hey, yes, definitely. I think, it was an exciting time. And I still think it's an exciting time. It's just, there's a lot of noise out there, right?
For sure.
So it mirrors a lot of my experiences as well, where, experimenting with influencers and stuff like that. And obviously you moved on, you went into Fullscreen, which, is one of the big MCNs of the day. What was your role there?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess maybe just kind of filling in the blanks. So, I did that activation and that was awesome. And then from there I joined Mekanism, and we continued to do a ton of influencer deals and influencer networks, and for years and years. I did that for another 6 or 7 years, and we did early viral videos and branded content and stuff. And then from my role at Mekanism, where I continued doing influencer marketing stuff, went to Fullscreen, which was I think my title was I forget my title actually, but it was I worked basically
Vice President of Brand Strategy.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, did a few things there. Worked a lot with like sales and integration, like the talent side of things, and developing kind of like influencer marketing programs that made sense, and then also did a lot of work on the channel strategy side of things. So there was a big portion of the business that was also like helping brands optimize their YouTube channels and implement best practices. So it was really those two buckets, doing a lot of influencer marketing and then helping brands on more of the service side in implementing best practices.
Great. Yeah. I had a couple of meetings back in the day with George, and back in the day when, a big channel would get wooed by the CEO and like, trying to join and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I remember those days. Obviously you were in it. So, one of the questions that we're often addressed is as a video and online creator is, the rise and fall of these MCNs, and like, do you have a perspective on that? I mean, I don't remember if did you leave as things were sort of like it was. I remember Fullscreen was sold. What happened over to and I don't want to say like what happened for you to leave, but sort of like your perspective on how that industry came and it went a little bit.
Yeah. I think speaking broadly and not about any one MCN specifically, I think a few things happened. I wouldn't point to one specific thing, but I think it really comes down to three things. Like, one is there was a real lack of competitive moat for most MCNs. There was also a lot of overhead that they took on and a lack of focus. So resources ended up being spent, and the MCNs were spread thin and burned through a lot of cash. And then also I think there was this resentment and backlash that came back and kind of bit the ecosystem in the ass, basically. And kind of breaking that down a bit, at the end of the day, the MCNs were basically, ad networks where, they could roll up these channels into a central CMS, and that would allow them to direct sell ads across the channels. Now, I think the big challenge or problem with this was, at the end of the day, like, a brand can go and buy ads direct from YouTube, on the auction or in upfronts. And so the reality is, few MCNs were really direct selling that ad inventory. And oftentimes it was just being sold automatically through the auction. So they weren't necessarily bringing a ton of value to a lot of creators. Now, obviously, this is a broad statement, but I think this is a general, a common challenge that a lot of MCNs faced. Obviously, in addition to that, in just selling the ad inventory, there was the whole brand integration component. And so, MCNs were direct selling influencer, brand integration deals. But the challenge there was they also didn't necessarily have a kind of competitive moat. They didn't necessarily have exclusivity. Talent could be hit up any number of ways. You could deal, if an influencer was signed to an MCN, it didn't mean that they didn't also have a talent manager or weren't represented by WME or UTA or CAA. And so they didn't have that exclusivity per se. And so I think that really diluted things quite a bit. And then from kind of like the overhead standpoint and kind of like the lack of focus, a lot of these MCNs raised a lot of money. Awesomeness raised, $162.5 million or something like that. I think Maker raised $65 million. I don't know what the others raised, but they were all raising tens of or hundreds of millions of dollars, and I think they felt a lot of pressure to spend that, and as a result, there weren't necessarily a lot of really tactical ways those dollars were spent. Oftentimes, like you saw a lot of these MCNs launch OTT platforms or SVODs. Maker bought Blip TV, Collective bought Metacafe, Fullscreen launched their own OTT platform. A lot of these MCNs expanded into any number of things, like Awesomeness, did a music division, movies, book publishing. They're in TV and production. So they were doing a lot of different things. And then on top of that, they were putting a lot of money, and you referenced it early on in those early days, they were doing these big upfront deals with talent, where, every MCN wanted the big, roster of the best known talent at the time. And so basically what they would do is, they'd go to, the top talent and their managers and say, hey, we're going to give you a minimum guarantee deal where if you sign with us, you're going to get, X, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. And this is your minimum guarantee. And we're going to try and sell against that. If we don't sell against that, you still get to keep the money. And so a lot of talent would sign on to, whichever MCN would essentially write them the biggest check. And that's not necessarily a sustainable business model because, at the end of the day, the MCN may or may not recoup those dollars. And oftentimes, I don't think they did. And then, of course, touching on kind of like the resentment and backlash that occurred, there was a long tail of creators who were signing up to MCNs. And I think early on there was that allure of like, oh, if I'm part of an MCN, I've made it. But, it became a land grab at a certain point. And smaller and smaller creators were getting signed. The MCNs couldn't necessarily service the, talent. So, you had a lot of these MCNs having, averaging hundreds and hundreds of channels per employee. And so the talent wasn't necessarily being represented or have a real great point of contact or being serviced, but was still handing over, 20-30% of their revenue and not necessarily getting anything in return. And as a result, I think it was in 2013, YouTube changed their policies. I can't remember what exactly it was called, but they made it much easier for creators to opt out of MCNs.
Yeah.
Kind of changed it from like managed channels and so on. And so, I think that was really in a lot of ways kind of the first sign and the beginning of the end. But that's my take on it. I do want to caveat that I think the MCNs that did a good job generally stayed very niche and very focused and focused on serving a core group of talent. And there were some great groups out there that did do that. I think the Collective is probably, which is now Studio 71, was probably the one that kind of jumps immediately to mind as one that created maybe a little bit more of a sustainable business model.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I haven't heard the word "the Collective" in a long time. As usual in these type of interviews, I bring in my anecdotes, but like for me, like one of the first deals I did was with Revision 3 at the time. And, we had a 2-3 million subscriber channel. So we were talking about like 7 years ago, and, got that minimum CPM, which was brilliant for us. And I sort of knew that they were hoping that CPMs would get higher and they'd be able to sell, which they weren't able to do that. Yeah, seeing that ecosystem and just seeing the lack of transparency is also one of the things that caused that animosity, right? A little bit of my story is that I tried to create an MCN in Canada. At the time, there wasn't many, and the US MCNs weren't here. And the production company was like, yeah, we should do it here. And then, we quickly saw that the model didn't work. And production companies, they're not into spending money. So, and I'm not a startup type of person. So in terms of I wasn't going to go out there and pound the pavement to raise money. That side of things was sort of very interesting. You brought back some memories in terms of all the OTT platforms that were on.
Yeah.
I totally forgot about those. They went nowhere. It's amazing. Yeah, it was a fun ride, and there's still a few out there that are still doing the same tricks, and obviously trying to sort of scrape the bottom at the end of the day. But it's really interesting to see how that came and went. And also, as usual, when it comes to Google, they won't do anything. Where there's an opportunity right in front of them, and then somebody will build something on top of it, on top of their services, and then they'll be like, you know what, we're going to Sherlock you and just take away that business and bring it internally. Or find a way to eliminate that. So that's very typical of Google type of behavior.
And I think along those lines, I don't think they really realize kind of like that loophole that they unleashed where it's like, oh yeah, I don't think anybody could have anticipated that these MCNs would just try and sign any channel, and I think that's really where it kind of got so out of hand. Like they're promising kids, hey, yeah, join with us and give us 20% of your AdSense or 30% of your AdSense, and everything's gonna be gravy. And it's like, no, what ended up happening was usually the kids ended up handing 20 to 30% of their AdSense over and didn't really get a lot. In return.
Yeah, and what I wanted to do differently is I wanted to actually support the creator and find the small ones who, or even the big ones. It's fascinating to see how the big ones are very focused on their content, but they're not very focused on their optimization. And because they've done really well with their content, they never sort of thought about it. And up until, it's the reason I have a job right now where big channels just come to me and they're like, hey, we just realized we don't have anybody doing SEO. And, we've run this game for the past, 5-6 years and it's been doing great, but now we sort of want to make sure that we're optimized. So yeah, that's where I thought there was a missing opportunity in the MCN side of things. It sort of turned around where instead of the MCNs paying YouTubers, you get YouTube channels paying MCNs to manage their channels, right? And I have a couple of companies I work with that pay high fees to get somebody to manage their channels, and some YouTubers need that support as well. So it's really interesting how that's shifted around. You are probably one of the most bullish people that I know in the world of influencer marketing. And, for me, I was very bullish on it. I'm a little bit more reticent than I was just because of the abuse more than anything else. What's your perspective on how things have changed over the last, I would say 5+ years at this point?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, and I totally am bullish on it, but I do want to caveat that it's like, I think, I mean, influencer marketing is like a very broad term,
Yeah.
and it's kind of like, it's almost like saying like, oh yeah, I do advertising. Some is good, some is bad, and I definitely recognize that. But I mean, just going back to like that, even that first execution, I always like remember that, and it's like I've been able to kind of like repeat those hits and the results time and time again. It's the only thing I've seen kind of just like consistently. It's like going into it, you can knock it out of the park. So I love it. But I think this is a great question, and in terms of the last 5 years, I think the thing that's really interesting is like, like 5 years ago at YouTube's Brandcast, John Green was like the big speaker that YouTube brought out, and his message to brands was, YouTube stars are building a world without you. And he didn't say why brands should advertise on YouTube, but instead say, what will happen to you if you don't. And he pointed out, very prophetically, that these communities have value, whether or not the ad dollars are going to be there, and these communities are going to develop their own ways of monetizing, and brands should invest in this and participate in this, or they're going to miss out. And I think that's really, in a lot of ways, happened. Today, when I talk to, buddies that are influencers or, talent managers and stuff, the ad revenue portion of the kind of pie, the revenue pie is pretty small nowadays. Whereas like 5-10 years ago, it was like 80-90%, maybe a creator would have some merch or that kind of thing. But nowadays it's like creators are investing in their own brands, and they're just crushing it. H3H3 has their Teddy Fresh line. Obviously last year, Jeffree Star and Shane Dawson, selling 1 million conspiracy theory palettes in 30 minutes. It kind of is like the benchmark everybody's kind of looking at. And they took down Shopify. They set in-store records for Morphe, who is their makeup partner. David Dobrik, at the end of last year, launched his disposable camera app. FaZe Clan and the Champion partnership. When they did their pop-up in Soho, like I think it was 10 or 15,000 people showed up, and they had to close down the streets. And then, beyond that, we're seeing it in books. Influencers have had multiple books hit the New York Times bestseller list. We've seen it with music. Tons of the big stars nowadays are, influencers first. I'm good buddies with Charles Trippy, who has been in the YouTube community since the very early days, and he's the bassist in We the Kings. And an album or two ago, they managed to rally their fan base enough that they actually knocked Beyonce off the #1 spot on iTunes. And Fault in Our Stars, knocked out The Edge of Tomorrow, which is a Tom Cruise film, from the #1 in the box office. So like all this stuff, it's happening, and the creators are being really savvy, and they're kind of like, they're not like sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting for a brand deal. They're just like, this is their career path. They're using YouTube in particular, but obviously all the other platforms as a launch pad to build products, build careers, generate a number of different revenue streams, and develop their own brands. And so they're able to curate and be far pickier about who they want to collaborate with, and do it much more in their terms.
Yeah, it feels like things are getting way more mature in a way, right? And it sort of brings back to the question of like, it kind of has to, because the FTC is paying attention to this a lot closer now, which is a good thing, but also the reason why influencer marketing and this type of I would call it almost edge marketing. It's like you're finding what I used to. When I used to do marketing, I used to think of like, I want to find the cracks that people aren't thinking about. And that's your challenge, right? You're trying to find the things that people or brands or nobody's thinking about and trying to find the holes. And that was sort of the influencer marketing space until the FTC came along, and now things are going to change a little bit. Do you think that the FTC is sort of getting better at being faster at this? Because, before it felt like, a new platform would go in and it would take them a while to catch up. And now it feels like they're already paying attention to TikTok pretty quickly. It just feels like the influencer marketing ecosystem is going to be a lot more regulated as we go. And they're going to set up these sort of, overarching, branching rules to make sure that, that it doesn't run away from them the way it has over the last 5 years.
Yeah. And I think that's a good thing.
Of course.
I think, the awareness is there. I don't think anybody who participates in this space can plead ignorance and not know that you're supposed to disclose things, which I think is really important. I also think it kind of, as a result, has this side effect of it forces brands to maybe think about their partnerships a little bit more and take it a little bit more seriously. And I think hopefully that will continue to nudge the industry in the right direction and recognize it's not this kind of like throwaway thing, but it's something that's taken very seriously. And I think, you kind of referenced it earlier, there's good influencer marketing programs and there's bad. And I still feel like, I don't know how many are good and how many are bad, or how many are effective and then how many are not. But there's definitely a lot that, to me, I look at and I feel like it just feels like a waste of time on everybody's part. Yeah. And hopefully with all this, the byproduct is, brands will just be a bit more methodical about how they approach things and kind of taking it a step back and thinking about not just how the FTC is going to impact things, but kind of how hopefully that the industry evolves. I think the thing that, I think would be great to see is, more brands and creators really developing thoughtful long-term partnerships, because this kind of like one-off throwaway culture, which is still a part of the influencer marketing ecosystem, in particular with so many of these kind of influencer marketing platforms like FameBit, et cetera, where you can kind of go in and people can opt in to just hey, I'll do a one-off about this based off of a couple bullet points. To me, it seems like that dilutes the trust for both the brand and the influencer. And I don't really understand why so many brands go about doing it that way. I feel like, if you're going to have somebody go out there and represent your brand, I mean, you at the very least want to have a real conversation with them.
Yeah. For me, as somebody who was in the marketing space, it's amazing. It's like, 10 years later, they're still thinking campaign thinking, right?
Yeah.
That's one of the lessons that I always try to sort of bring to even brands that I work with, right? It's sort of like, why do you keep thinking like a campaign and you jump into the ecosystem, then you disappear, and instead of creating a long-term relationship for both your audience and your collaborators. I used to be a media planner, and one of the most frustrating things for us is we'd say like, hey, let's get a X artist to work with us, and that would be like a completely other department, other way of thinking, and very complicated. Whereas now the media department can be their relationship with a creator, not be a like, oh, I'm going to call you in 3 months when I have a campaign, or more like, hey, there's constantly things happening, be involved. And there are obviously a lot of brands that are getting it, but yeah, a lot of brands are definitely just jumping in, jumping out. And most startups are probably, one of the worst when it comes to this. They just jump in, they dump a lot of money on influencer marketing and then disappear when they run out of money. But anyways, tangent here, I get into tangents. So
no, I think it's great. I mean, just to add to that, I think you're right. I think the campaign thinking is really at the core of it, and everybody wants to like make their mark and to like just come in and hit a home run. And it's a little bit, I think, at times a bit maybe ego driven, but if you think about it, like the best brands, they're built off of consistency, and
yep.
It's this compound interest effect. It's like just refining an idea and making it a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better over time. That consistency in message, it has so much value, and I think that just applies to so many things in advertising. We want to put our own stamp on things versus just kind of refining what may already work. And I think we kind of like overly complicate things for ourselves at times.
Yeah, I have a particular disdain for the brands that keep rebranding. Because it's like, the only people who care about that is you. But that's another my 2 cents. So Tom and I, we talk a lot about creators who focus too much on views on a social platform when they should be thinking about building sort of a product or building a business beyond it. You sort of mentioned it before, right? Do you feel like the new generation of creators is smarter? Like, it feels like TikTok has sped things up a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think broad strokes, I think that creators have, sped things up. Like I think they've learned from like the previous generations of creators in a lot of ways. Not to say that like there aren't people who maybe aren't building sustainable businesses, but I actually get the vibe that a lot of creators, young creators, are thinking about it through the lens of a business much earlier and have kind of seen what others have done to get there. And so are just like kind of a lot of these learning curves have just been collapsed. And I think, at its core, we see this trend where there's a recognition of the audience as kind of like the renewable resource. It's like the lifeblood of your business. And, views obviously are valuable, and these vanity metrics are easy to kind of get caught up in. But if I was going to make a blanket statement, I'd say probably creators are getting savvier about building a direct line of communication to their fans and owning that audience more so that they can create something that's a much more sustainable business. And I think there's been, I think the platforms have made modifications, and I think, to help support that. And I also think there's been a lot of businesses built up to support that. So it's much easier now than it ever was.
True.
I think there was a great blog post that one of the partners at Andreessen Horowitz put out in early February. It's called... it was written by Lee Jin, and it was called 100 True Fans.
Yes.
Yeah, and she was talking about how, like, Kevin Kelly, I think he was like the founder of Wired, or maybe the editor. He was really early on in identifying kind of like, in kind of coining the phrase 1,000 true fans. If you get 1,000 people to pay you $100 a year, like that's your fan base, and you can make a living. Now more and more people are doing that off of 100 fans, who are paying a premium price. And so That's really interesting. I also think that, we're seeing influencers able to monetize these audiences in so many different interesting ways. Cameo, they raised, another $50 million, whatever, 6 months back. Patreon has 3 million plus, paid subscribers. YouTube and Facebook and Twitch all have, paid subscription features and digital gifts. Twitch obviously has had it for a long, long time. We talked a bit about merch being a big part of things, as well as a lot of these influencers creating kind of their own, books and they're making films and they're going on tour. They're also, I think, being a bit savvy in cultivating a direct line of communication to fans, so they're not completely at the mercy of the algorithm. Whatever platform they're on. So we're seeing the rise of companies like Community, which is the text message based startup. Ashton Kutcher is a big investor, but you see tons of influencers giving out their phone number, and it's most of them. The platform they're using is Community, and it allows them to kind of sort their audiences. It creates a CMS so they can communicate to them directly. And then of course, big in the gamer communities, the Discord app, and there's a lot of great tools out there that allow these creators to cultivate their audiences and monetize them a number of different ways, and really serve their fans first and foremost, and not be reliant upon the brands.
Yeah, definitely feels like, now that you brought that up, there are a way more, sort of tools for for creators to, engage directly and not be beholden to one platform. I've seen more and more creators be way savvier in this space as well. Yeah. When I say things sped up as well, like there was a great article this week on Vox.com about a famous TikToker that has already sort of burnt himself out. And I felt like, wow, yeah, it's sort of like way faster than, you started hearing stories about YouTube burnout like in the last 2 years, and YouTube's 15 years old, and now like TikTok within a year or two, there's already like people feeling burnout. Now let's get back to Epic Signal. You founded this agency, right?
Yep.
So it was acquired by Mekanism, which was your employer before you went to, it's changed to Fullscreen, all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
What's the difference this time? Like, is Epic Signal a little bit more focused? Tell me a little bit about it.
I worked at Mekanism for 6 years, and I've known Jason, the CEO and president, for the entirety of my career, really. Because when my first internship at the agency I worked at before Mekanism, I was actually Jason's intern, and then he went on to become a partner at Mekanism, and then a year and a half later, he hired me. So we've been really close for a long time, and so. After Fullscreen, I went and I started Epic Signal, and I was really just focused on two things primarily. One was, helping brands, implement best practices and, with their content strategy on YouTube and influencer marketing. And that was the niche I kind of carved out for myself. We grew, I had a small team. And I did not want to be running an agency on my own. It was, it's a lot of work.
Dude, I just left an agency with my wife, so I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you get pulled away from like the fun stuff, which is like doing the strategy and doing the work, and you end up having a lot of conversations about contracts and finance and all this stuff that is not as fun. And so, I was looking to sell and actually had a few offers and was talking to Jason, getting his advice. And then kind of at the 11th hour, when I was about to sign with somebody else, he's like, just come back. And so, Epic Signal was acquired by Mekanism, and we're essentially a wholly owned subsidiary. when we got acquired, we broadened our offerings because, Mekanism is a big, big-ish. It's an independent creative agency doing a lot of integrated campaigns for brands. And so as part of that, we had to, service brands on the community management front, doing, content creation, community management, social listening, reporting, helping brands a lot on kind of navigating strategic partnerships, et cetera. So it really has grown since to be full service social agency. I would say, in terms of like our point of differentiation, I definitely lean into, we've got a unique, I think, point of view and level of expertise just in social video as a whole, whether that's influencer marketing or kind of social video content strategy and best practices and that type of thing. So that's really long-winded way of saying now we're part of an integrated agency and essentially act as the social media team. But I do think that foundation is very much still alive.
Yeah, I think it's a great sort of combination of, sort of expertise across the board that, a lot of agencies need. I came from big, media buying agencies who tended to just try to integrate their current talent into, understanding new opportunities. And I always felt like it wasn't exactly the best of results. Yeah. And there was also communications between divisions that wasn't also great as well. But I'm sure that's, gotten better. I'll admittedly, I've been outside of that agency ecosystem for quite some time now. So pretty sure it's gotten better. I'm going to surprise you with like a last question. What's exciting you these days? Like, I know like influencer marketing is doing well and all that sort of stuff, but like, are there platforms that you're like, oh, that has potential? Like Byte was launched a couple weeks ago. TikTok's name of the game these days, but it's always about the next thing. Is there anything that like you're like, whoa, I'm keeping an eye on this?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really fun and exciting in general right now because like I feel like for the first time in a while there's real kind of viable alternatives to, historically it's been, all about, YouTube, Facebook, a little bit of Twitter kind of is generally like when you, working with big brands on social, that's kind of like the lens through which a lot of things end up kind of being looked at. And with TikTok, I think TikTok's interesting more than anything in that it's, whether TikTok as a platform, stays, gets banned, who knows what's going to happen. I think that format, that vertical video, 60 seconds, set to a song, the emphasis is on the For You page and not your followers. Like that format, whatever that's called, I feel like there needs to be a term for it. It needs to be coined. I think that is here to stay, and I think it's only going to get bigger. Like, we have that. We have Triller. There's, Facebook has been experimenting with the competitor Lasso. There's Wildfire, Rizzle, Rumble, which is started by Rizzle. And then, there's kind of ones that are slightly different variations on it, like Tangy, which was launched by a Google incubator. It's almost kind of like when, Twitter launched, they kind of introduced the like status update. And like, eventually that was adopted by, virtually every single social platform. And I kind of look at that format as kind of something comparable. It's like, or when Stories was launched, it's like that feature gets adopted and it becomes a thing. How that kind of evolves and changes advertising, I think is really interesting. I think in particular, like when you look at these platforms, the differences on the surface seem subtle, but I think have very big ramifications. Like, one is, the emphasis on the For You page. So it's the algorithm is placing a priority on individual pieces of content, and it's less, do I have a big following and I can just kind of push content out to them? The variability is much, much bigger, and I think it gives people the opportunity to grow, and I think it gives it places an emphasis on content creation and being unique. Then I think the other piece that's really fascinating is that these platforms, sound on is essential. Like, they've built the apps with, you having earbuds on in mind. And historically, that just has not been the case. In fact, working in social, it's like ground into you almost just for like the last few years that like you need to build, all your video ads with the assumption that people have, sound off. And this totally changes things. The experience is to really understand the experience, you have to have sound on. And everybody's creating with that understanding. These platforms, TikTok, Triller, et cetera, they're kind of freed up from the bias towards like recency. The For You page, it's surfacing up content and it doesn't show like the date.
Yeah.
I think they're doing that really deliberately so that they can get people hooked and drawn in, and they're not predisposed, because everybody's predisposed to be like, well, what's new? If this is old, I don't want to watch it. And these platforms are kind of freeing themselves up from that. And so those three elements, kind of the priority on the For You page, where it's not about who you're following, the sound on being essential to the experience, and then the freeing themselves up from recency are kind of evolving social, I think, pretty dramatically.
Yeah, it feels like recency is sort of the answer to how the advantage of platforms like YouTube, right? Where, old content lives on forever. And, I've often talked here about, we always talk about creating, evergreen content. Yeah. And, I've had channels that have been like years old just blow up, and it's really, really interesting. I love that perspective. One thing that I've noticed recently is the storification of the internet. Like, everything is stories now. Like, literally, LinkedIn just announced stories.
Yeah,
the feed is almost dead in a way, right? It's all about just the constant whatever. A different kind of feed of stories on a constant basis. So it's really interesting how that's evolving the internet, or how we consume social. It's less about that tweet or that Facebook update. It's more about like that quick 10-second glimpse into my life.
Yeah,
and the creators that I follow, like, it's more than 10 seconds. It's usually 2 hours worth of conversations. But it's really interesting to see. Brendan, thank you very much. Obviously, what's the best way for people to engage and follow you?
Oh yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. So really, just type in my full name and then pick your platform. But my name is Brendan Gahan, and that's Brendan, and then Gahan is Gahan. You can find me, I've got a blog. I post sporadically, and I keep meaning to launch a newsletter. I'll get around to that soon, but my blog is a good place to go. I post probably the most frequently on LinkedIn. So, just look at Brendan Gahan on LinkedIn, and then Twitter as well, at Brendan Gahan, Brendan Gahan.
Awesome. I've been waiting for a newsletter for years.
I know. I think I've done it twice, but I swear my goal is this year. Like I literally, I think I have like 50 pages of like blog posts that I've been noodling with forever. And like this year, my goal has just been like, just don't overthink it, publish more. And so I will get to that.
I've been having that thought forever. I have like so many sporadic notes over the years that I'm like, I have this huge rant, but I've never been a writer. So it's sort of very self-conscious of myself to sort of like, put myself out there like that. So I know I shouldn't, but whatever. Thanks again. It was an awesome conversation. Hopefully we get to chill out together in whatever social event that brings us together. Well, that was fun. I'm so happy I finally got to talk to him. It was somebody, and I sort of said in the interview, I love the fact that, producing this podcast when I get to talk to people that I've admired from afar and socially stalked.
Yeah, that was a strong bromance in the making there for sure.
What did you think, Tom?
Yeah, it was amazing. Pretty much, from what I can tell, you pretty much spoke to the guy who invented influencer marketing. He was talking about, I think he might have even been an intern at the time when he was talking about, hey, why don't we ask these YouTubers to, let's get Smosh down here and see if they want to make some videos, and back when I started in 2012, Smosh were the biggest channel on the planet by a long, long way. So, he was way ahead of his time then. So, yeah, you're talking to a real OG there. So, yeah, incredible conversation.
His perspective and having, working with influencers since the beginning is amazing. I think it gives you a sort of like broad overview of the industry and his insights of what's going on and how effective that type of marketing is still right now. And it's going through a little bit of a growing pains. If people, stick to it and understand that things are going to evolve and get a little bit more regulated, the heyday of anything goes is kind of over.
Definitely agreed with him when he said that the days of people kind of being ignorant to regulation have got to be over if they're not already over. So you can't just bury your head in the sand and maybe just stick like hashtag ad somewhere in the description or something. Yeah, it's way past that point. To the fact when he was talking about the numbers that some of these influencers was doing, he was talking about the Jeffree Star line that did like 1 million units in 30 minutes. It's just absolutely just mind blowing. I was actually talking to a talent kind of agent yesterday, and she was talking about some of the numbers and talent that I cannot mention, but my eyes were just watering. It was like whatever you think would be an outrageous and egregious amount of money to make, you can pretty much triple it. That's what these kind of numbers were. So yeah, this is a whole new ball game, really. And my favorite quote was actually not a quote from Brendan, but one that he said was John Green's quote, where he said, "The influencers are building a world without you," and that's so on the money, equally as on the money now as it was. I think he said it was about 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, but that's just so true. Like brands are so far behind the times when it comes to actually connecting with audiences. It's no wonder why they're flocking to work with and paying so much to work with these influencers.
Yep. Awesome. Again, big thank you to Brendan for, taking the time, and thank you for listening in these, fun times. My fingers are in the air saying quote, between the fun stuff. Thank you very much to TubeBuddy for sponsoring the show. TubeBuddy is the best tool to optimize your YouTube channel. If you're managing one channel, if you're managing multiple channels, it has been a lifesaver in my work on a daily basis. Thank you very much, the team TubeBuddy, for sponsoring the show. Tom, we have a special offer, right?
Yes, you can get a exclusive Video Insiders multi-channel license discount by visiting videoinsiders.fm/TubeBuddy. Thank you, TubeBuddy.
Tom, it was a pleasure. Keep yourself safe and wash your hands.
Always.
If you're all still listening at this point, please give us a little bit of a shout out online, a review on the old Apple podcast if you're listening on Apple. There's no real reviews on other platforms, so obviously share the episode with people in your ecosystem that would really appreciate the insights from this episode. Have yourself an awesome, secluded week, Tom.
Thank you. Stay healthy, everyone.